Hello and welcome to episode 116 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. My name is Mark. I'm the Green Tank hosting this episode. And with me as always are my fellow tanks, Kellen the Red Tank.
Don't ever call me a tanker.
Why not?
I'm not a big boy.
And Neelan the Orange Tank.
Hello.
It was, interestingly, a year ago when we were talking about digital gaming. It was our famous Beware the Cyber episode. It was called Beware the Cyber.
Beware of the Cyber.
Beware of the Cyber.
I put on my robe and wizard hat.
One of the two. I can't remember.
Okay.
It was Beware of the Cyber.
I think it's
Of the
Beware of the
Cyber.
Cyber.
Yeah, this is my favorite episode title that we've ever done.
Okay.
In 115 episodes. What do you mean? I remember episode 61, Beware of the Cyber.
There you go. So it is interesting that we find ourselves almost exactly a year later being forced to play a lot of digital gaming in this sort of time of quarantine. So this is going to be sort of our gaming in the age of quarantine episode. Sort of sounds like a Hemingway novel. So we're going to be talking about how our habits have changed in terms of playing games in digitally.
81 years ago.
That is Hemingway. Exactly. Good call.
In the year of our quarantine. I don't know. This is like making me very religious.
Yeah.
Or patriotic. Or both.
Religiously patriotic.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about how we've been playing games digitally, maybe doing a couple recommendations as far as ways to play games digitally and which games we've enjoyed playing digitally. But before we do that, we're going to be doing what we always do, which is talking about the games that we've played digitally or otherwise. So, Kellen, what have you been playing?
All right. So, Neil and Christina and I got to try another game from one of my favorite Japanese developers, Sashi and Sashi. So this game is called Remember Our Trip. And the premise of Remember Our Trip is that you are playing a little almost polyomino-esque board game of placing buildings out onto your grid, but then when you complete a building, you make a memory. And then that memory goes onto a shared board of memories that other players will score bonus points if their memories match that shared memory pool. So in essence, we're all visiting Kyoto together, and I'm the first one to remember the monument that we saw in the left corner of the board. And then if all the other players also remember that monument, they will score bonus points. But if they remember a shopping center down there in the corner, they're idiots, and they won't score any points. So Remember Our Trip says, if you are able to recollect famous tourist destinations, you will help everyone have a clearer image of your journey together. When the map of our memories is formed, who can say that they've remembered our trip the most?
It says who could say on the box?
It says who can say
Perfect.
that they've remembered our trip the most. But this sentence, who can say that they've remembered our trip the most, is all you need to know about the game Remember Our Trip. This features the same beautiful artwork that we saw in the game In Front of the Elevators that we talked about last year. It is a very straightforward game, but you must arrange everyone's maps according to the same exact compass. There's a compass on each component, and that has to all be matching in the same direction. And then what you're doing is you're drafting circle tiles to place and build out buildings on your memory pool that then are translated to the shared memory pool. There are objectives that sort of inform what types of buildings you may want on your board, and you are just scoring points. It's a very puzzly game. It has a mild elements of area control because you might go, oh no, Christina's about to remember a shopping center in that corner by the river, and I gotta finish my monument there first so that she loses points.
Right.
In some ways, the theme helps and hurts this game because some of the mechanisms are harder to understand because the theme makes you go, wait, what? How am I remembering this memory? And then I'm locking in my memory. Remember Our Trip is good, but not great. Neelan, how do you feel about Remember Our Trip?
I think good but not great is exactly right. I want to just double down on what you were saying about how novel the theme is. It's something that's very typical of their games where the theme is something you've never seen before, and the novelty is super interesting, but does it actually help your understanding of the game? I don't know. I don't know that I ever feel like I'm roasting coffee in Coffee Roaster, but it's an interesting idea. Remember Our Trip has the same sort of element where this idea that you're sharing this memory space on the board is interesting, but it lends itself actually to some really weird conflict in the way that you think about the game. Because if I remember that this building exists over here, but then someone beats me to that memory earlier, then they're actually correctly remembering and they're benefiting off it the most. I think the thing that I found the most challenging about Remember Our Trip is there's this element that almost like a roll and write element where every turn a new card flips up and everyone now has to place their little chits in the same pattern. So say a diagonal comes up and you have to place your drafted tokens along a diagonal. And that might not be conducive to what you're trying to do on that turn, but you sort of either have to work around it or start remembering a different section of the board. I found that pretty interesting because there's a little bit of, I hope I get the right combination of things in order to maybe remember multiple buildings on one turn in order to block off certain sections of the board. There's a little bit of press your luck, and some of the structures are of indeterminate length. So you might have to sort of say, oh, I'm going to remember that this shopping complex was this large before someone else can claim it was this large and ruin my shopping complex. I like that a lot. I think that a couple of things stood out from the game, which was that the conflict between scoring points in your own board and getting bonus points from the memory board was a little bit funky, and it didn't really gel together until later in the game for me. We also had a very, very close game of this where we played it, which didn't seem in line with my read on the state. I think Christina and I both felt that Kellen was walking away with the game, and then we all ended up in relatively similar positions.
I've been to Kyoto.
And that's
You
why.
remembered our trip.
But you can't discount the novelty. You know, I'm used to Christina yelling at me and going, you attacked my, Yggdrasil and Blood Red, you took over my warriors in Inish. How dare you take that spot? And in this game, she was screaming at me. But what she was screaming was, how dare you remember that there was a park by the river? That was a shopping center. Like,
That's funny. That's really funny.
and that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Very novel theme, very beautiful production, finicky to set up, your compass aligning all the boards. I'm interested in playing it again with some of the more optional advanced stuff to try to see if the scoring could elongate out on the edges and make it so there's bigger winners and losers. It has a Kyoto side and a Singapore side and then some optional advanced variants to make it harder. So I'm excited to play it again, but it's not one that I can universally recommend that you hit that buy button right now based on our limited experience with Remember Our Trip from Sashi and Sashi.
I know Mike Delisio is a big Sashi and Sashi fan, and you just had a talk with Mike a couple days ago on the Daily Chat with Mike.
Yes, so that was then and this is now, and Time Chase is back. But if you go on the Dice Tower YouTube channel, you can look for the Daily Chat on March 30th for Mike Delisio and I having an hour-long, a beautiful, eloquent conversation about board gaming.
I think the way you handled question 3 in particular was exquisite.
Yes, thank you.
Thank God for question 3, because question 2 you really screwed up.
Time Chase.
Speaking of games that have a tile laying element that are thinky, so a few weeks ago I played Castell, which I traded for on the recommendation of Judy Boy, Matthew Jude, knowing it was one of his favorite games of all time. So what Castell is, it is based on human pyramids, which is, I guess, something that is popular in the Catalonia part of Spain. There are like competitions evidently where people are stack on top of each other and see how high they can make these human pyramids. How this manifests itself in the game is there are tiles of various sizes. There are 5 different sizes of tiles, and they are your human subjects basically, and you are arranging them to make pyramids, and you have to have the bigger people at the bottom and the lighter people at the top, and 3 people on one level can only carry 2 people above them unless you have special powers that allow you to break the rules. But that's basically the gist of that aspect of the game. You're building human pyramids with bigger tiles, bigger people on the bottom, and with lighter and lighter people as you go up. So what you're doing is you are sort of walking along the Catalonia countryside, competing in festivals, trying to make the tallest tower. And in some festivals, you want a certain type of person. So all the tiles are numbered from 1 to 10, 1 being the lightest that you place on top, 10 being the heaviest, which are the bigger guys at the bottom of the pyramid. And so some festivals, they want a lot of 4s, and some festivals want a lot of 8s. And so you're going to the festival.
Some festival want like skinny people, and some festivals want fat people.
Exactly, basically.
Is that thematic?
That's very thematic.
All right, keep going.
So you're going to festivals, you're trying to make big pyramids and also give them the type of people that they want. A sort of an interesting thing that happens in this game is that festivals take place in certain parts of the country, and they take place at the end of every round. So say at the end of round 3, there may be a festival in one location, but if you know you're not going to win that festival or do well in that festival, you can just not compete in it. And then the stakes for that festival become lower. So, for example, if you look across the table and you see that somebody's like all set up for this festival in the 4th round, and you just have them compete on their own, the amount of points they'll win for winning that festival is lessened.
So that immediately reminds me of Startups,
Right.
The Oink card game,
yes.
where if you are the only one invested in a company, you don't get paid anything.
Right, exactly.
And so you have to sort of hide perhaps what festivals or what things you're actually interested in, because if you come out too strong too early, no one's going to compete with you.
Right. Although the difference is with Startups, a lot of that information is sort of obfuscated and you can't tell what somebody may be holding in their hand. Whereas the people that a person has in Castell is open information. So this sort of leads into the second part of the game, which is what I alluded to earlier in terms of the thinky/calculating part of this game, because it is very, very calculating. There's a lot of calculations that are made.
So the best play in Castile would be to understand where everyone else's best play might be, because all the information is open?
Yes, but there's also the festivals at the end of the game are the ones that are worth the most points. So you always have an eye on the types of people that are going to be requested in the last festival. So that's something you always need to consider. And even when you compete in a festival where nobody else is competing, you get a point, which in this game is valuable. So whereas with Startups, if you're the only person who's in a company and nobody else is in it, you get nothing. In Castell, if you're the only person in there, you get something. You don't get as much as you would if you were competing, but you do get something. But there are these little side missions you can sort of do where you're not in a city to compete for the festival, but you are achieving a sort of structure that they want. So, for example, one city, Barcelona, may want like a 4x5 pyramid. Okay, and
For what reason?
that's how the Barcelona folks do it. They like 4x5s. It's like the historic thing. Anyhow,
Do they sometimes like fat people or skinny people?
they like all kinds of people as long as they're in a 4x5 pyramid.
Got it.
So that may be a side quest, for lack of a better term, in Barcelona. So the entire game, what you're trying to do is you're trying to calculate, okay, do I have the people, do I have the powers to achieve these side missions? Do I have the people, do I have the powers to win festivals? And do I have the people and the powers to do well at the end of the game? But all the while, you're calculating this by looking at the people, but also by actually making the pyramids. So there's a lot of like, wait, let me see. If I put this guy here and I put this guy here, am I a little bit better? So it's a very, 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 very puzzly game. Very puzzly. And so I thought of you, Neelan, when I was playing it, because I wondered if it would be a type of game that you would enjoy. But it might be a little, the game that I was thinking of was Five Tribes. Yeah, exactly. Like is it puzzly to the point of going overboard? The thing that it avoids, the problem that with Five Tribes that Castell avoids, is that you can still do planning. Mm-hmm. You know, Five Tribes, one of the problems is that when it came back to your turn, the board state could have changed quite a bit and you have to sort of reevaluate everything. There's not so much of that in Castell, but it just is a lot of shifting around your guys and trying to figure out what pyramids you can build. And so we found that a quarter into our game, turns started really bogging down. Now, it didn't hurt the game so much because everybody was sort of calculating. Everybody was sort of figuring things out, so we didn't really mind when somebody was shuffling their pieces around. But for a game that is as beautiful and feels sort of light, like when you look at the game, it has this feeling of like like a light puzzly game. Sort of feels to me like a Bärenpark, like, oh, it's got like a light theme, it's got all these colors, you know, and it's certainly not heavy. Like the rule set is not heavy, but it is AP prone. I can see players who have like AP issues really grinding this game to a halt, but I can also see people who like puzzly games really loving it, as Judy Boy does.
I struggle with that balance because in a game like Five Tribes, it's a game that on the surface you would think I would love, but the thing we've always said is that your best turn in Five Tribes is just spending time calculating every possibility and optimizing. And I would hate for that to be true here. It sounds like there's maybe more dimensionality to the puzzle, which would make it harder to like optimize. Absolutely. But I remember thinking the same thing about Pipeline, which is quite a heavy economic game where you also are building this pipe puzzle.
Yeah.
It's like you would hate for that to drag down the entire game.
Yeah.
But if that's the whole game in Castell, then maybe that's not.
It is not the whole game. There is like an area control aspect. There's other things to it, but I think pipeline is an apt comparison because pipeline, like the pipe laying, is like a part of the game. It's not the whole game, but it is a part that if you have issues with that part of pipeline, with the tiling and pipeline, you may have an issue with Castell. There is sort of an analogous issue there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something I would want to try for sure.
Yeah. Actually, now that you bring a pipeline, it does sort of feel in a way like Pipeline Light. Like, it has this other, it's not economic, but there's like a puzzle aspect to it, and it's got this like physical shuffling thing around aspect to it. So maybe it's like a lighter pipeline.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that is Castell. Neelan, what have you been playing?
So I'm going to throw back to a game that we didn't talk about that we played at Dice Tower West.
Yes.
This is Caylus 1303, which is a reimagining, a sort of a spiritual successor to the original Caylus, which, and Mark, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, either of you, one of the earliest worker placement games. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the way that Caylus works is there's a road of worker placement spots arranged in a linear path along a road. On your turn, you will choose a spot to place a worker at in order to eventually benefit from its action. We'll come back to that in a second. Once everyone has placed all their workers, they can pass until everyone has passed. Then all of the worker placement spots execute in order down the road. But there is a figure called the Provost that starts close to the end of the road. Some of the actions in the game, as well as any leftover meeples you have, can be used to manipulate the position of the Provost. So the twist here is that the actions only execute up until the point where the Provost ends up. So if you're trying to do some of the actions that are lay further down the path, someone might mess you up by moving the Provost behind those action spots. So you're committing meeples to actions that will just never execute. So it's a pretty mean worker placement game because that's a lot of what the spirit of the game is. Well, you can place your worker there, but I'm going to spend meeples to stop it from happening. And then you might place a worker further down the path or a little bit behind. So that becomes this high stakes nature to where the Provost ends up because, okay, I'm going to sacrifice my action just to screw you. Like, I don't care. Like, I've got the guys to do it. I'll do it. So there's a lot of that like fighting and negotiation. This is all in service of getting resources, which you can deliver at the end of every round. One of the things I thought was quite neat about Caylus 1303 is there are also special powers, which at the start of the game, they're all available on the board. And as you deliver resources, you can collect one of them. But then later on in the game, those special powers can be stolen from you. And they're quite powerful. Normally, you'd have to have a very specific combination of resources in order to deliver and get substantial amounts of points. But there are powers that perhaps make that easier. There are powers that allow you to do free moves of the Provost. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there. And I think it ends up being a game that doesn't quite feel like a worker placement game. I tend to think of worker placement games as just being maybe a little bit drier, a little bit more Euro. The fightiness of this is unlike anything I've seen in this sort of, old school Euro, really. Yeah, Mark, what did you think of Caylus 1303?
Yeah, so I was really anticipating my play of this because Caylus is one of my favorite games of all time. I can still remember the first time I played it. I played it way, way after it was published, and I just remember playing it and thinking, wow, this game could have been released yesterday and it would have been fantastic. So I was eager to play this to see where it stacked up. I was going into it a little bit afraid of the changes that were made, the player powers being one of them. There are no player powers in the original game. There's also coins in the original game, and that currency has been replaced by the workers. So I was a little apprehensive, but very excited. I will say that after playing Caylus 1303, I think it replaces Caylus, at least for me. There are things that I still kind of miss. There was a spot in the original game where you could place a worker to get turn order. In Caylus 1303, the first person pass gets first player. There's a couple other things that I still am not sure if I like more in this version or the original Caylus. But one thing about the original Caylus was that I always enjoyed it. It always felt like it flew by for me. But when I looked down at the time, 2.5 hours had gone by. Which is, again, if you're enjoying yourself, it's fine. But it's still 2.5 hours of time where you could have been playing other things. With Caylus 1303, we got through this, I think, in about 90 minutes, and this was our first game, so that presumably could get cut down, and it still felt very Caylus-y to me. The Provost is still there, the negotiation is still there. So I think if you lose anything in this game, and it still remains to be seen to me if you even lose anything, the changes could all be beneficial. I don't even know if the changes that I miss are, net negatives. But to get that Caylus feeling in 90 minutes just feels great to me. So I'm putting Caylus up for trade.
Caylus has that most interesting thing that Nealon alluded to, where you're having to select workers and having to select spaces, but in a different order than the order in which you want to resolve them. So you might collect wood near the start of the road, and then that wood needs to be used to make a building later on in the road, but that space later on in the road needs to be claimed first because you're not going to get it if it passes another turn. And so the same type of thinking that you do in a game like Dominant Species, where you seed the actions that are happening all before and then all the actions resolve from top to bottom, happens in Caylus.
Yeah.
Except Mr. Provost. The Provost makes it so that you can't actually plan it out completely. And I struggle, as the one that says, oh, I love interaction, I love meanness, I struggle with a straight worker placement game where your plans may not matter. Or you can set up, like if we're playing a Euro game, let's do a Euro thing. And sometimes the actions in this game feel incredibly mean. What I do like about it is that what that means is the further up the road that you place your meeples, the less likely it is that those will go off. So there is some trade-off there in your mind. Well, that space is extremely valuable, but it's the most likely to get done by the Provost.
Right.
With that said, it's still kind of this thinking where you plan out your perfect turn, and then there's not enough that you can... It hurts. It hurts a lot when it doesn't go the way you want it to. And I think the counter argument to that, obviously, is that, well, if you play something up near the end of the line, you better have the resources to manipulate the Provost or the alliances with the other players to make sure that it happens. There was one specific instance where Mark was going to move the Provost back 2 spaces, and it was just going to hurt me. Both of those spaces were my spaces that were going to go off. And I said, hey, man, you can do that, but actually now I can move the Provost after you, and I'm incentivized to send him even further back down the road, and your 2 spaces were the next 2 spaces. And so the 2 of us had to come to an understanding.
Right. I think in that case, we came up with some sort of thing where it hurt both of us in some way. Like maybe you paid for it, and I lost one thing or something like that, yeah.
And that is really interesting and feels really unique in a worker placement game. And so there are parts of Caylus that I absolutely adore. I don't know overall that it is a game for me. I think it's definitely a Mark game.
I think you're totally right, because my recollection of one of the things that was the most painful to me in our game was one of the player powers I had did allow me to sort of more effectively use resources in order to deliver them. And I'm planning my last turn on the assumption, badly on my part, that I was going to still have that player power at the end of the round. Kellen swoops in, steals it from me in a way that I cannot prevent him from doing because he's smartly placed his workers in a way that stops me from stealing it back from him. And basically my entire round gets completely messed up as a result of that. And that feels harsh. Like that's a good example of your best laid plans of just like falling to the floor.
Yeah, I think that felt... I dislike when I have to intentionally target someone in order to make myself win the game. You know, if there was a way to do the same move, but it didn't hit Nealon, I would have rather have done that. But in the context, I had so many leftover resources going into the final round that Nealon's power allowed you to convert those into the engine. And so by being bad at planning on my part, my bad planning was, well, I had all these disparate resources that didn't combine appropriately. It's like, well, I can just steal Nealon's power. I think at the end of the day, Caylus for me becomes an incredible design that I recognize the brilliance of, that if Mark said, let's play it again, I would play it again. But I don't have that itch or that want to keep it, to own it, to play it. And it's interesting to evaluate something that you can recognize as good. It's very tight. It's very interesting. It's a beautiful production. They've done a great job and streamlining and simplifying the runtime. I mean, it's fantastic. Yeah. It's everything I could ask for.
Yeah, it's everything you want in a revision, really, of a game. Yeah.
Yeah, as someone that hasn't played the original, I don't have that point of comparison, but it did feel extremely slick and streamlined for what it is. There's actually one more thing I want to very quickly highlight, which I thought was very novel for this type of game, which is you're also adding buildings to the end of the road, and those buildings are generally much more powerful than the ones earlier on. So the way that the game evolves as you're playing it also felt extremely novel for a worker placement game. Like, it's not just a static board that's fixed. So there's a lot to like there. I agree with Kellen. I think it's perhaps more punishing than I want from that type of Euro game, but I think I would try it again.
I will also say, now that you mentioned static, there's one thing which is in both games where all the available buildings are available from the beginning of the game. So from the beginning of the game, you can see all the buildings that you can build. That was true in this game and in the original Caylus. And that sort of could make the original Caylus feel a little staid because, you knew exactly which buildings were going to be available. Caylus 1303 changed that a little bit by making the beginning setup a little randomized. And there are also buildings that are not available to anybody at the beginning of the game that become sort of available through the contribution of resources. So Kellen and Neil have been talking about converting resources for a point grab. The person who does that the most every round can also use these buildings that are not available throughout the game. One last thing is that the player powers, we had 6 player powers that were available to us in our game. There are, I think, 12 player powers in the game, so there's even more randomization opportunities available in Caylus 1303.
Yeah, I can't help but, in our recollection here, I remember being pained after we got done playing it, even though I eked out a beautiful victory. I can't help but say, like, if you want an example of Euro design that harkens back to what a Euro used to be, there's nothing you should look at in the last year but Caylus.
Right, exactly.
That's going to do it for Caylus 1303.
And here to close out our What We Played segment is longtime listener Isla.
Hi, I'm Isla. I'm from Michigan, and I really like to play games. And now that school is out, we have plenty of time to play more games. So, Board Game Barrage invited me to talk about one of my favorite games. There are lots of games I like to play with my family because we really like to play board games together. One of which is Quicks.
I thought it was going to be Biblios.
Is a roll and write game. It's more of a puzzly game where you have 6 dice, 2 are white, and then there are 4 different colors which correspond with 4 different colored tracks on your player sheet, which 2 are numbered 2 through 12, and the other 2 are numbered 12 to 2. So on your turn, you roll the dice and you mark off numbers in sequential order on your sheet. One thing I really like about this game is that you are always active. You can play on other people's turns, so you're always engaged. And it's also really easy. You don't really have to have a lot of gaming experience to get the concept. It's just a lot of rolling dice, but I think it's a really fun game.
Perfect for Kellen.
Another roll and write game I like is Welcome to. It is basically the same concept, except you are flipping cards instead of rolling dice. But it's more of a advanced game. Not really, but if you are looking for something a little bit more puzzly, that's more for you. And that's all. Just have fun and take care.
It's nice. I like that. It's sweet at the end.
Isla, if you hear this back and Mark has edited out all the good comments you made, you now know how I feel.
Yeah, obviously that's amazing. Thank you so much, Isla. It's been awesome having you write in over the last year. It's been awesome to get your emails, and we hugely appreciate you actually sending us this voicemail segment. That was awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Send us an email. We'd love to make you an honorary junior tank. Let us know your favorite color, and we'll get a highly coveted Board Game Barrage poker chip over to your address with your tank on it.
Yeah, you'll be among, I think, one of only 4 people to have their very own Board Game Barrage
Titans of the industry.
Titans of the industry poker chip. It's going to be what? It's her?
Titans of the industry. So that's Mike DeLisio, Paula Deming, and Quince.
Yes. And now Isla from Michigan. Great. Love it. All right, so let's move on to our feature topic, which has sort of been forced upon us in a way. This is gaming in the age of quarantine.
Can't make me do anything, Mark.
What? I may not be able to make you, but the government is. Are you going to fight the man?
It wasn't until recently that I learned that Arnold was not our governor.
What?
Anymore.
What?
I just thought he was going to live forever and hold the post forever.
That's right. It's like governor,
just
governor
fight
for
people
life.
off?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right. It's a physical confrontation.
Exactly.
When did we lose him?
Like 10 years ago?
What did we lose him to?
Terminator.
That's That's right. The T1000 got him. Jerry Brown. But anyway, so obviously big game nights are not happening.
Well, and maybe not so obvious, but if it's not obvious, stop having big game nights.
That's right. Yes, you should not be having big game nights. That's correct. So that's forced us to scratch that gaming itch in other ways, those ways being digital gaming.
Let's get
Digital.
Nice, Mark.
There you go. I'm almost here for you, Kellen. So how has gaming under quarantine changed the way you guys have been playing games?
It's been cool to see the number of people that are willing to sort of jump onto some of these platforms that, I mean, have been around for a long time, like Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, Board Game Arena. These aren't new platforms, but just seeing more people embrace them and, you know, organizing games to play online has been really, really cool to see. I have not engaged as much of the ones that are closer to real-time type experiences. I think something like a Tabletop Simulator where there is a emulated physicality to everything, like you're literally picking up pieces and sliding them around the table, but it encourages you to actually be in a actual session and close out your game in a few hours. You're not generally saving the game and resuming it later. I haven't done as much as that as I would like, because finding blocks of time is still hard for me at the moment. But more asynchronous experiences, like Board Game Arena, for example, where a game can play out over many days. Kellen and I are in a game of Trois that we've been playing for about a week at this point. And it's just whenever we have time to look at the board, evaluate it, and send our move to the server, that's what's convenient. And that's what makes sense for me right now. So I've been doing a fair bit of that.
Yeah.
I think what is interesting and causes you to think and evaluate is how many types of social events are being redone in the online space right now. You know, I have seen friends doing happy hour brunches on Zoom. I've heard of weddings happening where people are going and getting married and everyone's just watching it on Facebook Live.
Right.
You know, so even the concept of a wedding. And so how does that translate to board games? You know, we've seen people in our Discord organizing Skype and Zoom games of stuff like Gloomhaven and party games like Just One. You know, Just One is such a simple party game. You could literally hold up a piece of paper and play it on Zoom with a webcam.
Dean, who is the person who hosts the game night that we all sort of belong to, has basically converted that once a week in-person game night into a digital game night where people are all on Discord and they are arranging games and playing them on various programs.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to see, and there's so many different implementations of how you can do this online, so we thought it would be cool to give our recommendations on different games and how to play them online. I think for me, where it nets out is I have been able to play more games asynchronously, like Neelan spoke about earlier, but the time that I have to sit and dedicate to a game, I still feel like there's better value for my time. You know, because, for example, one of these places is called Tabletop Simulator. And in Tabletop Simulator, it's a physics engine. So it's as if you are sitting at the table and all the components are there, and you have to, when you go to pick up a card, it doesn't just deal you a card. You have to move your mouse and pick up the card from the stack. And it on the face of it seems absurd to me. I will say that my position from a year ago when we weared the Cyber has softened dramatically because people want to play game. People want to interact socially. And I think board games are in many ways a social tool for a lot of the hobby. It's been fun and interesting to see how everyone has adapted to this new paradigm, temporary paradigm. But I think for me, it's harder to adapt because the things that I like happen between the turns.
Yeah. And it's funny, my position is also, I guess, softened is the way to go because I still do not really enjoy asynchronous play as much. I feel like a pressure to take my turn. I feel like a pressure to drop what I'm doing to make sure that I move games along. And so while I absolutely see the benefits of playing asynchronously, it still isn't something that really has worked for me. But what I was very pleasantly surprised with was playing a real-time game. In my case, it was playing Haunted Teutonica on Tabletopia. I had not had any experience with either Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia, these like physics engines, and was a little wary of how that would work. I mean, the way you sort of describe it, Kellen, is sort of what I was worried about. Like, oh, when I draw a card, it's not going to automatically do the action. I have to figure it out, and I have to move the pieces. And, you know, it's basically just like having the pieces in front of me. There's no guiding. It's like we just have to make sure that we're within the rules. But I was really, really pleasantly surprised by how effective it was. And, we were playing with voice chat, and that really helped make it feel like as much of a real game night as possible. Like there were a lot of like joking in between turns, and it's certainly not the same as sitting across the table from somebody, but I was really, really pleasantly surprised by how close it was for me. And like, I just remember right after playing that game of Haunted Tonica, just going to the Tabletopia list of game options and just being like, wow, there's just like so many games. In a way, I've played Board Game Arena where the games are built in, and so when you take an action, it sort of automatically does what the action is. There's no leaving it to the players to know how things resolve. But in a way, there's something sort of cool about Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia, forcing you into the old ways of like, you have to learn the rule book. There's something about that is a connection to the like playing in person thing that I sort of like. So, I saw Glenmore 2 was available on Tabletopia, and that was something I was instantly excited that I was going to have to like read the rule book of. It was like another game.
So that's a great thing we can press in on, right? So A, do you log plays of digital games?
I do.
And B, would you feel like for us to cover a game on the podcast, if you said, hey guys, we're playing Glenmore 2 this Thursday night, would we talk about it on the subsequent Thursday as if we had played the physical game?
And you know what? My position on this has changed. I think absolutely. I think it would be more difficult, but I could teach a game like Glenmore 2 on Tabletopia with a voice chat, and we could play it, and it would be close enough to the experience we'd have in person to make it qualify to me as a regular game played of Glenmore or whatever the game was, if that makes sense.
But for someone like Neelan, right?
Right. For someone like him.
Who likes feeling the thing in his hands, he's got to have a copy of Splendor sort of by the computer.
Yeah.
So with the right hand, he makes the move.
Yeah.
But then in the left hand, he's fondling the board game component.
The chips are an important...
Rolling around his fingers.
In my fingers.
But that isn't a non-trivial, like
it
physically...
Is, no.
I absolutely don't think it is. And I think that's one of the things where I would struggle with, especially if it was the first play of a game.
Yeah.
Like, we joke about it, but physicality is a big, important part of quite literally the feel of board gaming to me. Like whether a piece is big and weighty or there's a lot of it and you sort of, there is something that gets overlooked in a lot of designs, which is how important that physicality is in the way that you evaluate pieces, and sort of just the value of components in a game has weight depending on their physical weight and their feel and their texture. Yeah. Obviously, that's lost. I think something like Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator gets you closer to the authenticity of that experience because there is a big element of actually moving pieces around the table. So I can imagine in a game like, let's say, Cthulhu Wars, if you brought this giant creature from off screen, it would still feel good. It would still feel big.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would be entirely lost, but I do worry about my ability to evaluate a game authentically without the physical component. At least
your ability to evaluate a game, like to evaluate your position, to evaluate the state of the game.
No. I'm talking from a review perspective.
Yes,
like because we often talk about like how good it looks on the table, like how beautiful it is, and that is a big important part of the hobby to me.
That's interesting.
I think as long as we were doing it with the caveats, like, hey, we don't know how this exists in a physical space, but here's how it plays.
That's
here's
very
how
interesting.
It feels.
And so my other example before we recommend how you play games online, is like Bärenpark. Okay, Bärenpark's setup is egregious. It's a crime against humanity. It's a travesty. It should never be allowed to exist, but it does. And you click go on Tabletopia, you just reset the board, and it's all ready to go. So you're cutting out the sorting of the components. I'm thinking about Imperial. I spent an hour and a half playing the game of putting it in its box.
Yeah.
And if I play Anime Trains on the computer, on the cyber, you're going to forget about that. And so the highlight of it will be in the playing of it. So question, does Tabletopia score for you? Or how does scoring work?
You do all the
You have to grab victory points and you have to literally move your chip up. Could you knock it off with your hand?
Yes, you could. Yeah, you could.
Did that happen?
No, in our game wasn't as contentious as that. But you do make a very good point. I wonder if this is best served for games that everybody's played at least once. Because for me, when I was playing Haunted Tonica, like I sort of knew how things looked. Mm-hmm. I sort of knew how things felt, so I could very easily transport myself into that position.
Would it be more or less easy to cheat? Like, would it be obvious if I just go and grab the points?
It'd be more difficult to cheat, I think.
But it'd be hilarious.
It would be hilarious. It would be hilarious. And that's the thing. Like, hilarious is a great word because, like, I could see us playing Cthulhu Wars, and then Callan just bringing out his Cthulhu and putting, or the green guy, as Christina would say, and putting him right in the middle of the board and saying on voice chat, which is like so important to me, saying, "Didn't expect that, did you?" You know, like I can just see it, and I can see it working. Like I can see it working for us and for a lot of groups, and that's the key. Like the voice chat was super important because it made it feel like an experience, like we're sitting down at a table, we're talking to each other, and that's something that's lost for me in asynchronous games.
Yeah, and so we want to make sure we close this out with where our recommendations are. So I've been playing Twa, Keyflower, and Innovation on Board Game Arena asynchronously. I think that works in a very limited framework, and that framework is, do you have 1 or 2 games going at any one time?
Yeah.
It's very hard to remember board state in 3 games of Innovation at once, let me tell you. And coming back to a game after 6 hours, after a day, you have to remember all the plans that you had been trying to make. But it is a great system because Board Game Arena knows all of the rules.
Yes, right.
And it enforces the rules on its own. So I became a premium member of Board Game Arena because only one player from each IP can be playing in a household. So for Christina and I to play in the same game, one of us had to become a premium member. And I've enjoyed that limited framework of playing some board games at some point. And I am going to be looking around on there for what to try next. I think that is a great option for those of us who just have less time in quarantine. I think it's a very interesting social situation because many of us have lost our jobs and are looking for work, but also have a very big amount of free time. And then those of us with jobs are in some sense being squeezed a little bit more to work more hours. So I have less hours than I've ever had to do anything.
Same here, actually, yeah.
And so this is a way for me to keep connected with board gaming, which is great. You know, like who could fault that? It isn't the same thing as actually playing the game, and I'm having to try to trash talk in Discord. But I am up for that asynchronous play. I think it would be harder with a game I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, but I'd be willing to try it for the right game. But I also don't want to ruin some big splashy experience for us.
Sure.
You know, we have a member of the Discord who asked if we wanted to play Oath, and we are very excited for Cole Worley's new game Oath. And I don't know that I'm ready to commit to playing that digitally when I know it will be here physically, and I want that to sort of set our mood.
Yeah, the way we've been talking about it, and in my talk about Glenmore 2 playing it for the first time online, I do feel now we've talked about it, I would back away from that. I do think this is probably best served, although it's great that it's there, but it probably will color your impression of a game to play it in the not meant for way.
But you know, quarantine is real. It is happening, and it's going to continue to happen for the foreseeable future. So I need to commit, I think, to trying something stronger on Tabletop Simulator.
So to that end, we've been talking about it, and for my birthday, which is on April 11th, we're going to do a BGB game night digitally. We haven't hammered out the details, but if you want in on it, join the Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. We're going to have party games. We're going to have strategy games. We're all going to play with you folks out there. If there's a digital implementation of Biblios, I'm going to track that down and take on all comers.
It's kind of sad that you couldn't get anyone to come to your birthday, so you're having a digital birthday party.
That's right. We have like digital streamers. So that's going to be April 11th. We are setting the time tentatively right now. It's about 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. And we're going to go until we drop, which is probably going to be about 3 hours. But we'll see how long we can last.
And there'll be virtual alcohol libations.
Right. And also virtual non-alcoholic libations.
What? I don't... It's like Second Life.
Well,
we're going to do it all in Second Life.
I'm hoping Isla comes out to play.
Oh, that's true.
So she can have a soda. So join us for my birthday on April 11th, Board Game Barrage Digital Game Night. First annual.
We're committing to doing this every year?
Yeah, we're going to celebrate my birthday every year digitally. Perfect. I love it.
That's a sad state of affairs.
So let's...
You know, when you're like... The people are like, oh, I don't know that I have enough friends to have a birthday party. You've just now,
guaranteed
you've gotten rid of that problem for life.
That's right.
Capitalizing on our situation.
So join the Discord. So if you're looking to maybe check out a couple of the avenues where digital games are played in preparation for Board Game Barrage Digital Game Night, what would you guys recommend to the listeners?
I think the two big ones that are going to make the most sense in preparation for the digital game night are Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator. I think those are the ones where you're going to get, like you were saying, the more intimate experiences happening. And I think those also probably need the most advanced preparation. So I would say that if you're if you're looking to experience that with the voice chat and like with the interacting with the system, try get one of those.
Yeah.
Play around with it. They're pretty well tutorialized, so you can just get in there, muck around with the game, and get a feel for it.
Yeah, before my first game of Haunted Teutonica on Tabletopia, I watched a 10-minute how to play games on Tabletopia video, and it worked fine.
I think that it really depends on how social you want to be. You know, there are, on Board Game Arena, you can get involved in real-time games as well with strangers. But if you're looking for a low-risk way of getting involved, you could join our Discord. I know there is a tabletop simulator Discord with thousands of players who are just looking. So if you just want to try it out, get in a game, fill a slot, you can find that Discord community as well. And there are also a bunch of one-off sites that we'll include some links to in the show notes for different specific game implementations or different publishers who have online implementations.
And if any of this is something you're curious about, but you're just not sure how to get started, then please come to our Discord and ask around. We or anyone else there will be happy to help you.
Yeah, there are plenty of listeners who are just super, super helpful on the Discord that would love to help you out. So that's going to do it for the show. One other quick mention. We are organizing a Board Game Barrage math trade. No rush to join it yet. It still hasn't been started, but by the time you listen to this, it'll probably be up and running, but you'll have at least a month to submit your games. I'm going to be talking to people on Discord, so this is another reason to join Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, because I'm trying to figure out if we want to make this a sort of intro-friendly where I'm thinking the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to have it so that after we run the actual trade, if there are any egregious errors, like somebody ends up trading for 6 copies of One Night Ultimate Werewolf, we would rerun the trade. So I want to make this a very intro-friendly situation.
You're the judge, jury, and executioner.
Exactly, as I've always wanted to be in a math trade. So that's something I'm considering, although if you think we shouldn't do it that way, join the Discord and let me know, because I'm definitely open for advice. So if you're interested in doing a math trade, go to boardgamebarrage.com/Discord and join the trading channel where we'll be talking about the first annual Board Game Barrage math trade. Otherwise, you can find us on all forms of social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on everything that you want to find us on. You can find our site at boardgamebarrage.com. You can, again, join the Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord or on the BGG Guild at boardgamebarrage.com/guild. Until next week, stay safe, enjoy your digital gaming, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So long. So, Mark, in recording my very own video, my first BGB video,
Yes, sir.
I have come to appreciate your editing.
Finally.
Well, let's caveat.
Yeah, because before you would be like, just edit this and let's get it done.
Just get it done
Yeah.
in 30 minutes.
Do whatever
or
you got to
less.
do.
Yeah,
Whip it up.
and-
Yeah.
Well, I say a lot. And so
But you're not.
I'm not egregious.
Yeah.
So
You're-
it's and then a sentence starts on the end of the
I think you're the least
problematic.
Problematic.
I'm the least problematic
Well,
on the podcast.
I will not
generally.
say. I will say least problematic is a fine line. I will say in terms of quantity of you are third. You're the least.
Oh, I'm third.
You're third. You're
Third of three.
third of 3, which is
Okay.
where you want to be.
But in terms of content,
But-
most of Kellen's
But your
stuff has to be-
and this may be like a little too, not that I have any technical know-how when it comes to editing or anything, but your connect to the next word
Exactly.
in a problematic way.
Because how do you break it off?
Right. Whereas Neelan and I, our tend to be separate. So you can just cut it and go.
And whereas I have
You have
I
an
problematic-
lead in. You're
Yeah.
undulating.
because you guys, can't think of anything, so you say
Right. Right. Ours
and I
comes
go
from
here we
That's
go. Like we're in it to win it. Let's talk about board games.
Yeah, right. A couple weeks ago, I played Castell, which I decided to trade for because I know it's one of Matthew Jude's favorite games of all time. What?
Can you just call him Judy Boy?
You call him Judy Boy.
No, but we call him Judy Boy. What are you talking about?
What?
Everyone, he likes it. He said he
liked
liked it.
It was like a Facebook comment, I think, right?
Yeah, he replied
Okay,
back that he
sure.
likes the nickname. So just, what do you mean?
I don't
We have
know.
a- we have a shared POV.
Judy Boy?
Oh, this doesn't sound like something you would
No, it's not something I would say, but I'll say it.
I think you could just say, then you could just immediately say Judy Boy.
Yeah, you
That's
say
funny.
Judy Boy. You want to be the Judy Boy friend?
do. I don't want to be his boyfriend. What are you talking about?
'cause
I have a
it's funny.
Judy girlfriend. I'll just interrupt. I'll just say Judy boy.
Sure.
Yeah, you just.
I picked it up. I traded for it based on the fact that it's one of Matthew Judy's favorite games.
Judy boy.
That sounded terrible. Come on.
What do you? Oh,
Judy boy.
Pizzazz. What do you?
You gotta act like
what do you?
part of the
What do you
flow.
want me to go up a vocal register? Need to punch me in
like,
the
give it
balls? Get a little.
something. Judy boy. What is that? It's like a computer said it.
Well, then why don't you?
Okay,
say it,
I'll
you
say it.
idiot?
I'll say it then. What the hell is that? It's like
I was trying. I can't put on the spots.
it's like you said at the end of the
Stage
episode,
fright.
and I
Have you heard
cut
of
it and I
stage
placed
fright?
it in there.
Stage
Judy
fright.
boy. Holy
Stage fright.
crap.
I'll try again.
No, I got
do
it.
it
Let me do
again.
it. Let me just do it.
It's like one of those, like, we had a fun conversation with Judy boy, and it was great.
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay. Damn it. Okay, we're doing this over. I'm going to save that one.